Chairman, I'm going to call the City Planning Commission July 27th meeting to order. And if we could have the roll call, please.
Mr. McGorry?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Castile? Here. Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Mr. Bajali?
Here.
Mr. Whalen?
Here.
Mr. Zuloff?
Here.
And we have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the June.
Motion to approve the minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Zuloff. Second? Mr. Bajali, seconded?
Second, yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item of business, it's new business. Mr. Sean Sprouse, on behalf of the Views on Venice LLC, submitted an application for a substitution of a non-conforming use at 3712 Venice Road. Property was previously used as a motel, and the applicant is proposing to use it as apartments for rentals lasting longer than 30 days. I'm recollecting that we may have talked about this property earlier this spring, and I think Mr. Zuloff just reminded me of that. I can't remember if this is a similar application or now it's a different application involving the same property.
I believe Mr. Oaks will address that.
Yes, Mr.
but
Chairman, I will
We,
address that.
just to confirm, there was an application that came before Planning Commission, but there was no, that was tabled. And there was a couple outline questions. One of them was whether if that transfer of uses occurred, if the prior use would no longer be allowed. And Mr. Sprouse wasn't sure if he wanted to stick with that consequence, if that were true. And then another question was about whether the units that were less than 400 square feet would be allowed for residential. So that kind of got him stuck in a city process. He has received a variance for the size of the units and is wanting to move forward with residential, regardless of the consequence of not being able to do the motel use anymore. So those have been resolved from the previous applications.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
to clarify, I believe it was April of 2021 that it was previously heard. It was so over a year, well over a year ago. And the way I read it, it's virtually the same application with additional information about the size of the units. At the time of having just reviewed the minutes of that meeting, at the time it was asked, would all the units meet the current minimum size for a residence? The answer was they weren't sure, 300 to 400 square feet, but they were willing to combine units, 1 and 2, the two front units. This application shows an additional, with a sketch showing the square footage, which it turns out those units are less than 200 each. So if combined, the variance, the deviation from the standard would be trivial. But I'm just, since we brought that up, maybe perhaps a little prematurely, that was, my apologies, that was the sticking point, I think, that led to the tabling and the withdrawal of the application. And you're going to learn that since there's been a variance granted to allow the small unit, and I'm going to take the position that that's a good reason not to grant this application, is because it's going to pretty much allow substandard housing less than 200 square feet when for permanent residency when the standard is 400, less than half.
Thank you, Mr. Zuloff. Mr. Oaks, you want to explain this application?
Yeah, I'll give a brief, review for this specific application for 3712 Venice Road. The site is zoned general manufacturing. To the east, south, and west is general manufacturing. To the north is local manufacturing. All the surrounding uses of this site are residential. The existing use of this site was a motel, so a form of residential. The proposed use of this is a more restrictive residential use. So the applicant would like to turn the old Bayview Motel into monthly rented apartments or yearly rented, however the applicant would propose it. The hotel is a legal nonconforming use. The applicant is seeking approval to allow multifamily residential use, which is a more restrictive use compared to the motel. The project proposal has 5 one-bedroom apartments ranging in size from 390 square feet to 403 square feet, and then 2 studio apartment efficiency units at 198 square feet. To Mr. Zuloff's point, that is the 2 units in question that he brought up. A variance was granted in June of 2022 for both of these units, or both these proposed size of units under the 400 square foot minimum for multifamily residents. So a board did vote on that, and that vote did go in the favor of the applicant. So staff has determined that the more restrictive use is a better a better fit for the existing site here. It's surrounded by residential structures. The parcel is too small for any serious manufacturing use. So the existing use staff has determined is the best fit to some high-level residency or low-level density residency. There is a few points in our bicentennial comprehensive plan that outlines some parts of this project, which is to support the development and rehabilitation of a variety of housing types in the city, specifically rehabilitate homes and affordable housing specifically, which the applicant stated that's his goal, is to provide affordable housing for residents. So there is additional processes beyond this scope that are required after this meeting. So inspections with the building department and other city departments would be required. So what we're looking at here tonight could also be parking requirements, which staff's determined there's approximately 12 spaces, and based on the zoning code 10 and a half spaces would be the requirement. So this applicant would be meeting the parking requirements. There are no concerns from any other departments as of this meeting. So in conclusion, staff supports the approval of this substitution of a non-conforming use with the following condition, and that's that all applicable permits are obtained through the building, engineering, and planning departments.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, could I get a better understanding, were the 2 front apartments, did they also get a variance, or is just the larger ones that got the variance?
Through the chair, all units got a variance. So the 198 square foot units did get a 202 foot relief to meet or to legally operate under the 400 square foot requirement.
All right.
I have a question, just so the proposal includes 7 different units. And so what will be the smallest of the units, square foot wise?
198 square feet.
Okay.
I believe there's 2 units
And you
that are
say
198 square feet.
a variance has already been obtained from the city for that.
That's
And
correct.
Was that the
The
zoning?
Board of Zoning Appeals granted
Yeah.
the variance.
Okay.
Unanimously, too.
To Mr.
I may add.
Zoloff's point about, fear of substandard housing, we do take that seriously. My experience in like the tiny home movement, which is fairly trending, is that those units are between 200, 250 square feet, that there is a growing demand for smaller units. There's only 2 of them in this case, so we weren't overly concerned about just the 2 units. If somebody was going to come in town and build a building with 75, 200 square foot units, we might feel more concerned about a density of uses like this. Also, single occupant households are the largest growing demographic in the United States, so more and more people are living by themselves for at least some stretch of their lives at all ages. So we're not overly concerned, and that's why we wrote the staff report to the Board of Zoning Appeals that we were not opposed to this variance, and they did grant the variance for the size of those 2 units.
I might add that in Perkins, I believe there's a number of hotels that do long-term tenancy rather than just regular hotel usage. So, and I think there is a need for it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add to Ms. Blair's and your point, I talked to the building official, and there is a state requirement that if it's less than X square foot, which I think it's 200, so in this case it would apply, there's no more than 2 people max that could live in that unit. So if that's substandard or not, it's up for debate, but that is a state requirement that the building department will be enforcing.
So if this were approved here, the building department, as a state requirement, would still not allow more than 2 people to live in those 2 units?
That's correct.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I see they're calling them studio apartments. Is there a definition for what a studio apartment is?
Through the chair, if I may, in our zoning code, there's not a specific studio definition, but in a national sense, there is. It's usually if there's no bedroom, so an open floor plan, kitchen, bed all in one room, bathroom, if it's in the same, I'm assuming not the same room, but it's an open floor plan, essentially.
Also called an efficiency apartment often.
Any other questions on the commission?
Are the smaller units, are they located next to each other?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Pardon?
He didn't hear you.
Are the smaller units located next to each other?
To the chair, yes, they are. I believe they're in the back. So in this case, they're numbers 6 and 7 on the screen here.
Right.
In the back of the building, they will be next to each other.
Is there a way that they could be retrofitted to combine those two units?
So this
Is the-
conversation was brought up in the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. The applicant was hoping to was hoping to have more housing accommodations if possible. So the one unit would limit the amount of people possibly that could, or families, was the exact word he used, that could live in these units. Instead of having one family, you could have 2 families possibly now, or two partners, or two, mother and a child, instead of just one whole family in one unit, is what the applicant was.
There's no compass rose, but I thought those 2 units were in the front, the small ones.
I don't think so, but possibly you may be correct.
Yeah, that might be.
Yeah, you are correct, Mr. Zuloff.
They're in front.
Well, and I've got one other question. What would prohibit somebody from coming now and saying, I want to rent this for 30 days? Under its current use? Is there anything that would prohibit that?
I don't believe so.
So basically, it's already allowed. It's just maybe nobody's coming and saying they want to do it for 30 days, but it's already an allowed use.
Mr. Chairman, that was asked and answered at the last one, that occupancy in a motel is not permitted more than 30 days. That was
Is
a
it?
point of discussion. And no, if it's like a motel room, you can't rent it for more than 30 days. I'm sure it's done.
Is the optimum word there not more than 30 days? Because I think
I don't know the wording. We'd have to look it up, but basically, the limit is 30 days for a motel room, and the minimum, I don't know what the minimum stay is for, is it 30 or 60 or whatever? I don't remember now. We've talked about this enough, I ought to remember.
I guess with I understand where Mr. Zuloff's going, and I appreciate his comments. But I don't think it would really change the use very much. And I do think that I would prefer that maybe they combine these units. But if that's not going to be the case, then I guess I would vote to approve it.
Well, there was another point too, and that now that I thought it was a dead issue, but now that if you're talking about long-term, okay, so if you have a motel room, you're not going to have more than one car. Even with one car per unit, that's a challenge. I don't know if you visited the site, but you really got to wedge the cars in there to get around, right? There's no such, you can conceive of more than one, at least one car per unit, and more than one car per unit if you do this. So we don't even have reason to think that it's already a bad parking situation, a vestige parking situation. So even that, and then the only other point is, we keep saying we have received no comment from fire, from police, and what does that even mean? I don't recall if there's a requirement that they respond to this. So does that mean that that they saw it yesterday, or does that mean that they reviewed it and they have no comment? Or I'd feel better if the fire marshal thinks that this is a safe situation where you can't even get to the back of the property if there are cars parked there. which I think seems to be the case. From what I can see, we're looking at no site plan or anything.
Through the chair, if I may, there is a 2-week deadline that staff puts on themselves. There's not a requirement. There's not a specific deadline that we must send to the other departments. There is a 2-week before the meeting that we put on ourselves to get these agendas or the site plans to other departments, and we give them a week to review, to give us feedback before the commissioners get
Okay, just as an aside, it might be helpful to review the wording, because the record kind of says, well, they didn't say anything, so it's okay. It's not what we used to do. I used to see, now I'm seeing on every report, they haven't responded. And we used to say that they have no objection, a more affirmative response. So just a point that this is not a trivial change, especially since it seems to be the norm now.
So
Through you,
through the
Mr.
chair,
Chair.
can I respond to that real quick? Or go ahead.
Yeah, is there a representative or the owner here this evening? Could you?
Can I make a comment before we move on to him?
Yes.
Through
go
you,
ahead,
Mr.
Mrs.
Chair.
Castillo.
It's more of a question. In the report, it pointed out that this was a better use than the motel use was currently, and I just wondered what was the appeal to this situation as opposed to keeping it transient and kind of, with us having all these discussions about needing more Airbnbs, wanting to capitalize on that, it seems like we're taking a space that's built for that and making it something else when we're turning residential spaces into transient. I'm just wondering, what is the appeal to moving into this longer-term, short-term rental situation as opposed to keeping it more of a hotel, kind of a quicker turnover transient space?
To the chair, if I may comment to that. So there was a lot of feedback from residents along the hotel with crime rates at this hotel. I don't know if that could be operational, that could be functionality, that could be
Previous
whoever
owner.
owned it.
Sure.
Previous owner, excuse me. So that was one concern. And then citywide, we had heard positive remarks about how this is becoming long-term housing because of the negative aspects that were associated with the previous owner. And then from a zoning code specific standpoint, this does create less traffic, less turnover traffic to the site, so automobiles and people. So staff sees that as both positive attributes. And the applicant has stated that he wants to transition this into more affordable housing, which I think Sandusky lacks in many areas. So we, as a staff, see this as a very positive attribute to this area.
Traffic is a problem there?
Excuse me?
Traffic is a problem. This would materially change the traffic situation. We either have nothing or very little or Cedar Point traffic. How would this be a material change to the traffic situation?
Less traffic turnover.
Yeah.
Residential use is
In and
less
out
of a trip
in and out
generation.
of property.
Generator
I get that.
than a motel use.
Uh,
It's a
Okay.
less intensive overall use.
For that area.
Of any property.
I mean,
Residential.
but you, staff determined that would be, for that space, with all of the information that you've gotten, it would serve better in this capacity than in the hotel.
Since the owners
That's
I
Since
think
the
you're
owners should
meaning
let him speak.
traffic in and out of the property, not general area.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah, so
Okay, thank you.
motel use is less of a trip generator, so in and out of the parcel would be less vehicle traffic with residential use than a motel use.
One more point. Mr. Oak stated that it is a lawful nonconforming use at the moment. My question is, it's not in use right now. It hasn't been in use for over a year. I don't know how long it was not in use prior to the first application. It will, so by next April, it will have been 2 years. Are you sure it's currently a non-conforming use? Because that doesn't run forever. It's not been in use. What's the limit? Is it a year or 2 years?
It is a year of voluntary vacancy of a property. And since this has been stuck in a city process of, are they allowed to do this? Can
Well, they
do
withdrew the
this?
application. Is it?
To the chairman, May, it was tabled and it was encouraged by the commission for.
Right, but then the applicant withdrew the
And I do believe that
application.
he was confused on the process, and he got stuck in the turmoil of the process, and he is
Yeah,
now here
okay.
following the process.
With appreciation for that, I mean, what we've done is, the applicant stated they were willing to combine the 2 units and get rid of the 2 rabbit hutches and have a more reasonable situation for long-term occupancy, and now we're, well, that's no longer on the table, apparently. Anyway, that's all I have to say about it. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, can we hear the owners here? We could ask direct questions to the owner if we could.
I'd like to ask staff a couple of questions
Go ahead.
first. if I
Go
could.
ahead. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to hold you up. Just to follow up on Mr. Zulof's question about parking, in looking at the photo, are there designating, or will there be designated parking spaces or with lines? Would that be part of the, I see the owner shaking his head, yes. And then my follow-up question is, well, 2 follow-up questions. Would it be angled parking or perpendicular?
Staff would suggest angled in this situation, given the narrow.
If it's angled, is there enough room for a drive behind the cars?
Yes, staff has determined there would be enough space. It has been used previously as angled parking, continue to
I
be
think that was
used.
one of Mr.
Yeah.
Zulof's points.
Well, I'm skeptical as to whether it could get past site plan approval because it's so narrow on the east side.
Well, again, that was my question, and staff said yes.
If I could touch on Mr. Zulof's comment. So since he's not expanding the footprint, it wouldn't require site plan approval. So it's taking a pre-existing, what maybe at one time was a conforming structure and, reconforming it to it's a non-conforming, a legal non-conforming structure as well, not just a use.
Okay. Any further questions of staff before the applicant speaks?
Not for me, no.
The only question, when was it last used, for the record? When was it last in use for its current, as a motel? Or inhabited in any regard? That's my question.
Through the chair, staff has no way of knowing when exactly the last exact day this was in use, given the information that we have.
So you don't know if it's,
Maybe the owner could
process
tell us.
notwithstanding, you don't know if it's, for sure, if it's a lawful non-conforming use. Even in April, it may not have, in April of '21, it might not have been a conforming use. And I'm sure the applicant might know the answer to that one, and I'd love to hear it.
Okay. I guess I would invite the
Through the
applicant.
chair, may I have
Yeah.
just 2 comments? One, this last time that this case was in front of the planning commission was right before there was a very large staff disruption in the planning division. And I spoke to the owner when I was brand new, and I was like, I don't know, let me find some answers. I mean, it really has been stuck in a city process for a while. So we have treated it as a legal non-conforming use because the previous writer of the report, when they came before you last year, treated it as a legal non-conforming use. That's one comment. I also want to just make a statement about the other departments' comments. So when Alec and I kind of inherited the department, our understanding was other departments knew when you were getting agenda items based on staff sending out the agenda items to you, or it being publicly available, or it being in our system. And we made sure to elevate that process. So we've formalized that process when we compile all the cases that are going to come in front of Planning Commission and we send an email to all departments and say, please let us know if you have comments about any of these cases. We point out specific things like, hey, fire, you might want to look at this. Hey, police department, please make sure you look at this. So Alec and I have really formalized that process and helped make sure people are turning their attention to those. And when they don't send us any comments, we take that as no objection.
Understood.
Thank you.
Any follow-up from the commission? Okay, I would invite the applicant to come up. If you would state your name and address and
Good
say
afternoon.
what you have to say. Good afternoon.
Yep, Brett Adams is my name, and my address is 301 46th Street here in Sandusky.
Okay.
I am one of the partners in this particular venture. You've spoken up to this point with Mr. Sean Sprouse. He's been detained actually at another property in Columbus, so that's why I'm stepping in tonight. I can answer right away the question of use prior to our taking the property. Was in March of 2021. This was being used as a motel, but as you can maybe expect or suspect, that was not generally what the use was for. There were long-term tenants in these properties, well beyond the use that a motel would expect. So I have not been as involved on the back end with some of the renovation plans and things like that as much as I was on the front end of being the heavy who had to throw out the last of the squatters in March and being threatened daily in the morning by these people just to please get out. Even offering them opportunities to help us trash it out, to try to again extend what our intent is to that part of the community is just to help clean it up a little bit and maybe rid that space of folks that maybe don't need to be there. So March of 2021 was the last time that there was someone living in any of those properties.
Go ahead.
I have a question. So with respect to parking, not so much the spaces, but are you comfortable that there is adequate access around the building totally when cars are parked in parking places?
Around the building, no. If you go to the west side of the building, it's grass. There's the property, the land comes up to the building, so there's no blacktop or any kind of drive space around that side. One of the things that we have discussed is you can see the plot of ground in the back, and again, Mr. Sprouse could speak more readily to the rules of engagement when it comes to this, as he's much more well-spoken in terms of the property piece of things. But our feeling has been that we've got all this property behind this patch of something that we certainly don't want to mow. So our thoughts have been and our intentions have been to look into how could we turn that into additional parking as well, which would then, even with the angled parking, would then allow people to back up and go and turn around in a space back there. I think it's certainly usable for that, but I know there are rules that pertain to that. So we're planning to look in that as part of some of the other things that we're still planning to do in phase 2, which is what I call the front 2 units that we've been discussing.
So the grass area to the west is owned by somebody else, is that correct?
The grass area, I'm not 100% sure where the property line is, but Mr. Lombardi lives on the west side and owns that property over there. We've met him a few times. But yeah, to my knowledge, there's an old broken down fence that, assuming that that's dividing the property line or on the property line, there is some space that belongs to us on that side, but I don't feel that it would be enough space to actually create any kind of a drive around.
Are there any exit doors on that side of the property?
No exit doors from the units themselves. There's a little storage space on the back of that building that has one egress door there.
Okay. Mr. Jackson?
Yes, I visited the property yesterday, and do you have a projection on when you think this is going to look? It looked like there was a whole lot of work to be done on the units. Do you have a projection on when you think you will be ready to rent these spaces out?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question for us. But our intention is to have the 5 units that we've been discussing finished by September the 1st. We are in the final stages of just buttoning things up and cleaning them up. I imagine you saw that when you were there yesterday. Now, phase 2, or what I refer to as phase 2, is the front units. We recognize that there's going to need to be some re-engineering and some structural alterations of that. We're actually meeting with John Fike tomorrow to look at some different options for how we can make that happen, so we understand it's going to be a little more in depth with permits being required and things like that. So that's going to be phase 2 of it. And as far as a target date for that, I would have a better answer after we meet with Mr. Fike tomorrow.
I have a question. Even on the larger units, are those still essentially going to be a large or a motel room with a separate bathroom and then with kitchen facilities inside, or?
Yes, sir. When you walk in fact, the structure is laid out just perfectly for efficiency apartments, particularly on those 5 units anyway. When you walk in, there's a living space, as we kind of described there, a living space with a kitchenette, we would call it, a kitchen facility right there, all in one room. There is a separate bedroom for each of those, and then a bathroom off of that. So there's 3 distinct living areas inside of each of those 5.
So they each have a separate bedroom?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, they do.
Okay. Any other questions?
I had one.
Yes, sir.
I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the 2 at the front. I mean, if those 2 were joined together into one, it would be 400 and kind of be a slam dunk. Can you tell us why you want to keep those 2?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's, some obvious reasons, right? There's more occupancy availability if there's 2 versus 1. So it gives us a chance to accommodate, as you stated, more than just one individual couple or family in that sense. We've talked about, from a business standpoint, from a pro forma standpoint, obviously that's requiring some more than we intended originally, but we've run into that with several properties in town here, so we're getting pretty good at making lemonade. But yeah, I don't even know that we would prefer to leave them separate. But if that's a deal breaker, it comes down to it. We've already thought through the process of what it would be like to combine those. And yeah, to your point, it would maybe eliminate some of the red tape that we've run into as a result of trying to keep them separate.
So you see my problem, though. You already have a variance, which means that we're assuring. Without the variance, we could have said, okay, 390 square feet, close enough. That would have been a chip shot. But now we're assuring 195 square foot units, which, by the way, have no egress other than the door, because there's no window that doesn't either have is either a tiny window or a block window or got an air conditioner in it. So you got a single, you have, and I don't even know if that's a requirement, a secondary egress, but having, I don't know if apparently there's no objection to from the fire marshal, so maybe it's fine. I don't know.
Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bajali?
Mr. Adams, do you have other properties?
Yes, sir.
And so you're familiar with property management and those types of things?
Yeah, I'm new to the game in the last few years, but yeah, I am.
It seems to me, in order to make any sort of rental property work, it all comes down to management. And especially on a property like this, there's going to be a lot of trials and tribulations because of the size of the units. But I imagine the hotel business wasn't very good out there. I mean, if you were to keep it as a hotel, I think you'd struggle, because I just don't think the hotel business is very attractive at that end of town.
It depends on what kind of hotel you're looking to run. It looked to be pretty attractive to some people when we got there. But to your point, yeah, our intention, we are multifamily unit, long-term, 12-month lease rental operation, and so it just doesn't fit our model and our structure. But yeah, the way I look at it from our experience is that this building, this current structure is laid out perfectly for efficiency apartments, so that's immediately what we go to. Our intention would not be to keep it in any kind of transient state.
And you and your partners will keep a close eye on things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a property management company out of Columbus that handles sort of the big distance type operational activity, and then I'm the boots on the ground since I'm the local guy. So, like I said, that was sort of how I got elected.
Then we know who to call if there's problems.
Call me. You can call me. Everybody else does. So.
All right. And I guess just one last thing: the parking issues. I mean, it was operating as a hotel. I don't know. Maybe there were parking issues. Maybe there weren't. But I guess it survived somehow.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, now I do have a question. I think I've heard it referred to a couple times as Sandusky doesn't have a lot of affordable housing or something like that. Just how affordable are these projected to be? What sort of rent do you think that these should garner?
Well, that is an area of discussion my partner and I are still having between ourselves. I would safely say that we're going to look at between $550 and $675 a month for each one of these. Which market, in terms of the market goes, that's certainly fair when it comes to the current state of market rents. We have a number of other multi-unit duplexes and quads or fourplexes that have two-bedroom units here in town that we rent for $650 a month. So I think that's somewhere in that areas where we're going to plan to rent these particular units at as well.
Two questions, one for, so there will be no state hotel license associated with this?
Absolutely not. Nope.
And then I guess my question for staff, and I don't want to overly complicate this, and I know it's not being conceived of this way, but if this were approved, could this be rented as transient? Okay.
It's in a general manufacturing zoning district, so they wouldn't be permitted. They would no longer retain the legal nonconforming use of the motel. They would be switching to conforming use of residence.
And if it were kept as a motel, it
They can do that right
theoretically
now.
would be.
Yeah, it could be all Airbnbs right now.
Right, but then it would require a state hotel license.
I believe so because it has more than 6 units.
Okay, I'm not sure about the unit requirement. Okay. Any other questions?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I
Ms.
just,
Castillo.
do I understand correctly? So you would be renting even these less than 200 square foot rooms out for $550 a month? Because to me, that's not affordable housing.
Yeah, no, we are looking, what I should have clarified, I'm referring to the 5 that are
Okay,
that
I
we're gonna be
figured I
finished.
just wanted to go on record to just be
Phase
clear.
2 is up in the air even as it relates to
Okay.
the amount of rent, so thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
I apologize.
Any other questions? Does the applicant have anything further to add?
No, I mean, I appreciate your time. I know this has been, back and forth across the net many, many times, but being new to Sandusky, my wife and I moved here in 2018 from Columbus. My business partner still lives in Columbus, where he plays with right around 400 units of property, so that's why I said that he speaks to it much more defined than I do. But when we came to Sandusky, I mean, our goal was to become a part of the fabric of the community. We figured if we were leaving Columbus, we wanted to come to the next best place in Ohio. And outside of coming to Cedar Point and falling asleep in the car a couple of times on the way home, I'd never really been to Sandusky. So since we've come here, I personally have thrown myself into just about anything that I could to become a part of this place. And when my brother-in-law, who's my business partner, came to me and said, hey, for years he's been talking to me about getting involved in real estate. He said, I think I've got an idea with some places. I just looked at that as another way to contribute to the well-being of what we're trying to accomplish here. And so to your point, sir, being the guy that you can call when something goes wrong, and I know you jest, but at the same time, I take that responsibility seriously. And so our goal, I know that there's the idea that, well, gosh, we could probably still rent these transient or 30 days if somebody wanted us to do that. I can assure you that's not our intention for a number of reasons. It doesn't fit our business model. And secondly, I don't want to deal with people every 30 days when it comes to that sort of thing. So that's really what's driving us in that, is to create more stable, affordable, and permanent housing in that area, and just to really do what some other folks have done all the way along the way, and that's just to clean up that part of the city. So I just thought I'd share that with you. That's my heart. I mean, we love Sandusky. I think I'll die on 46th Street. So we're going to be here for a while, but I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr.
It's not going to make any difference, but I'd just like to point out that there's a growing interest in recognition of the Route 6 corridor as a historic corridor and a tourism pastime like Route 66. There's an organization that's building up steam, and this obviously would be a missed opportunity, but an important feature of these historic U.S. routes are the motels, and it's kind of cool when somebody renovates and plays on the nostalgia on these U.S. routes. So just a chance to plug that, even if it doesn't prove to be terribly relevant here, or I was kind of hoping maybe it would turn into that, but thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
I mean, I think we can see that he's committed to doing the rentals here, but I think really the main thing we would discuss, or I would be open to discussing, is the front two. I mean, I don't really see why they can't be one. He doesn't sound overly objectionable to it. I'm curious why the board, I wish I would have watched the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting now. I did not, so if somebody did, please share if there was some rationale on half the size when those two could be combined into, you'd be looking at 6 total units instead of 7.
Well, I think they've been approved by the zoning board, so as far as the size of the units are concerned, that's a done deal. They've already been approved by the zoning board.
I feel the same way.
Well,
Oh,
yeah,
no,
I'm kind of curious what it.
They also
That's
need
what I
our
was
approval.
going to
A
say.
substitution of a non-conforming use, what exactly is our
Yeah,
requirement here?
they need both approvals. They need this and the BZA. They've already got that. If we approve this, they're not even required to take the sign down. And I don't think anybody can make them even take the old motel sign down. So you're kind of having you're almost a stereotype of the old beat-up motel come permanent resident operation that is invariably kind of seedy. Now, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but there's nothing really, given our history here, there's really nothing to stop that.
Is anybody prepared to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve this request as presented.
Second.
As submitted?
Yes.
Okay. And it's been moved and seconded as submitted. Any discussion on the motion? Call the question?
Mr. McGorry?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Castile?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Pajali?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Mr. Zuloff?
A completely pointless no.
Okay. Motion or application passed, approved. Good luck going forward.
Ditto.
Next item of business, Sandusky Star Lanes, Inc. has submitted a site plan application for an expansion of the existing bowling alley at 2097 Cleveland Road. If staff could educate us a little on that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is zoned RB roadside business. To the surrounding zoning, to the north is residential multifamily, to the east is general business, to the south is both roadside business and R160 single-family residential, and to the west is roadside business. The surrounding uses are both residential and commercial. The existing use is a business commercial site. Proposed use is staying a business commercial use site. The applicant proposes to expand the current building by additional 19,586 square feet and also a 2,116 square foot covered outdoor patio. This will accommodate a restaurant and an addition for an arcade gaming area. And the addition will put the total site coverage at approximately 20.8%. The building height will be 30 feet, which is below the 35-foot maximum building height requirement for roadside business. The proposal, as proposed here, it contains 214 parking spaces. The proposed parking area coverage is just under 100,000 square feet, is 6,114 square feet. The landscape area proposed is 51,345 square feet. The hours of operation will be Monday through Thursday, noon to 11 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 1 a.m., and Sunday, noon to 10 p.m. Excuse me one second. So the proposed landscaping has been expanded from the first site plan review with the applicant. With staff's direction, they now have 20 trees proposed. The requirement is only 8. The parking as proposed, that 1 second here. The The code specifically says 249 spaces are required. Now, so after staff analysis throughout the winter and through the spring with the applicant, the 214 proposed number is somewhere in the middle between a staff analysis approach, which is what we took 50% of some of the floor area for the arcade as an example, because there will be a combined use. So we called it a combined use analysis with staff's interpretation. And that took us to 176 spaces would be required. So this is in the middle between 249 the code strictly requires, and then the 176 spaces that staff analyzed was appropriate. So 213, we'd spoke with the applicant, the 213 spaces, they're confident this will accommodate both their employees and also guests to the site for all the events that will be now under one roof, which are the bowling alley, the restaurant, the arcade space, any additional like office space that they are proposing. So there was a fair amount of changes from phase one of staff meeting with the applicant back in the winter and to now, and that is both the traffic flow and entry sequence adjustments, parking space adjustments, increase of accessible spaces, narrowing Cleveland Road curb cut to only a right turn exit only, additional landscaping requirements, substantial landscaping additions, phase parking plan, dumpster location, in a bike rack location. There is a potential future parking space to the north that would provide 18 spaces as a phase two, potential phase two. That is in the works possibly with the city to have a bike path parking area for visitors to park there and jump on the bike path that is going to be proposed to the north of this site. So the applicant proposed to possibly keep that as a phase if the city's still interested down the road, or if required by the commission tonight, could be potentially addition to the 213 parking spaces proposed. The engineering staff did get back to the planning staff. They look forward to working through drainage items with the designer and the developer with an additional phase. So no objections from the building staff, police departments and fire departments both have no concerns. Staff, based on these findings, staff does recommend approval of the proposed site plan at 2097 Cleveland Road with the following conditions, and that's that all applicable permits are obtained through the building engineering and planning departments prior to construction.
I'll just add one comment to build on what Alec mentioned with engineering staff, because we had several meetings with these applicants and Director Aaron Klein, who's with us today, if you have any questions for him, and also Josh Snyder, and they're well aware of what Josh wants to see for their stormwater permitting as to where the drainage will go and et cetera. So that's the clarification of that engineering staff comment.
Thank you. That was going to be my question. I was going to say, what is wrong? What's going on with the drainage?
No, it was just like, Josh was like, here's all the things you're going to have to tell me when you actually pull your permit for this parking lot as to like, where's the water going? And it's probably going to be this or that. And you might want to think about adding extra landscaping here, because then you can help in the, detain some water with that. So that was part of the landscaping that they added based on his comments in anticipation of the stormwater review that Josh does after the site plan approval process.
Okay. Bill, can I, through you, Mr. Chairman, just to build off of that, I also I had the same kind of ambiguity with the building staff comments. Additional submittals showing compliance. Is there something specifically that they're out of compliance with, or is that just?
To the chair, if I may, that's just, there's an additional permitting process for the building. So for like
So just the
ADA
regular-
parking spaces, they'll be out there to measure that it's adequate.
Okay.
But on the site plan specifically, we don't, as a staff, have any concerns. They're proposing an adequate amount of spaces,
Okay.
but the building department always checks and makes sure they're up to code.
Just
It's
wanted to
kind of
make
like
sure I understood
our
those.
blanket statement at the bottom of our recommendation always
Right.
says, yeah, if you get your permits, that's kind of building codes thing, like whenever you submit your building permits, then we're going to
So-
require you to make sure that they have building inspections and the ADA codes.
All of the
are-
things that they're required to do, you're just saying, we're going to make sure that they have
Yeah,
these
that's
things
correct,
as
yeah.
well. I just wanted to make sure I understood that it wasn't something specific outside of what's already required legally. Okay, that's it for me.
Through you, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Miller
Oh,
had his
Mr.
finger
Miller.
up
All right.
for you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is maybe a simple question. In the back of the property on the sketch, that shaded area might say Sandusky Bay Public Pathway. Then right below it would be presumably the ingress to that area, future bike path parking lot. But what I'm seeing, it seems to say one way. Is it like the Roach Motel? How do you get out of there? I mean,
Through the chair, if I may, the Director of Public Works is here. He had advised the applicant to draw it in that way to just save space. He doesn't believe that there would be a large amount of traffic going through there, so having a stop sign and a one-way, to allow less space to be used by asphalt, he felt comfortable going forward with that approach.
people would actually go in and come out because it's very low traffic volume going back there?
Correct,
Is
yeah.
that- Yeah, okay.
So single lane would be a better descriptor of that than one way.
Yeah, Aaron was ready to jump in.
Single lane should be fine.
Any other questions? Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, I'm looking at the diagram here, and it looks like the new portion is larger than the old building. You called off use as being an arcade and restaurant. Is it that all that's going to be in that building, the size of it, an arcade and a restaurant?
To the chair, if I may, there will be a kitchen space, but that doesn't count towards parking. There'll be a small office space. There's going to be a party event space that's going to be connected to the outdoor patio. And then a majority of this is going to be arcade space, which is, as I was trying to explain, staff's analysis of the shared use concept, where most of the people coming won't only be coming for the arcade, they'll be coming for the restaurant and the arcade and the bowling. So counting 3 separate counts for parking, staff doesn't feel is adequate or appropriate for this site specifically, because they were looking at 300 possible parking spaces if we separate all the uses.
You mentioned the patio. Is it possibly that they're going to be renting space out for like weddings and parties and those type of things?
I do not believe so. The applicant never stated that to staff.
My recollection was that there was going to be part of a patio that was going to connect to the party rooms that are rentable, and then part of the patio that's connected to the restaurant. That's to the east of the red line that's on the diagram there. I also wanted to point out in the list on that shared use parking calculation, their square footages and their uses are in there. So right underneath the original bowling alley, there's the game arcade area, 10,000 square feet, party rooms, 935 square feet, office space, 400 square feet, and then restaurant, 1,900 square feet, restaurant kitchen, 1,900 square feet, and then the outdoor patio is 1,350 square feet.
Okay, so it's going to be multiple uses other than just the arcade.
Correct.
That's
The arcade
correct.
is the largest use at 10,500 square feet.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Pajali?
I'm wondering, are the owners here? Do you think you could come up and share your vision with us, just to give us a better understanding?
Hi, my name is Jeff Lizzie. I live in Shank Road in Perkins. And my brother John lives in Sandusky.
Sandusky, on Prairie Road, yeah.
So we've been in business, we're third generation owners. We've been in business for 59 years. So we have a great bowling business with the locals. And we're proposing to turn our business into a more modern, instead of a bowling alley, it'll be a bowling center, family entertainment center.
Have you ever rolled a 300?
I have 110.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
110,
About 80
300?
more than I do.
Yeah.
Didn't expect that.
If I break 50, I'm happy.
What about hole in one?
Sorry, I wish. I would trade any of my 300
not
for
yet.
one. So we own a second property in Port Clinton, Harbor Lanes, that we've acquired about 9 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So we had 24 lanes there. We took 8 lanes out and did this same thing. We put laser tag, a huge arcade with redemption, and it's going well for that whole community over there. So with the, all the amenities in Sandusky, with all the water parks and the family entertainment dollar, we wanted to join that.
So do they, I recall there was a Bruno Lizzie's pizzeria out there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still functioning out there?
It's called J&J Pizza.
Oh, I always heard it was so good, but I never got out to get any pizza. I thought now might be my opportunity.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah.
There you go, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Any further comments, gentlemen?
No, we're just excited to expand our business, in Sandusky, with the sports force and with that whole corridor, on dressing everything up. And, like, for example, our parking lot's been in quite bad shape for a little while, but we've been waiting for this project to dress that whole corner up, open it up, and make it look a lot more inviting. So, and obviously with the bowling business, it's not as busy in the summer, but with this addition, we've seen in Port Clinton that it helps out for year-round. So,
Mr. Chairman, while they're still up here, let me, in case they want to respond, I'm mildly concerned about the parking, but I'm more than countering that is the exciting prospect of more economic activity, more jobs, and allowing our workers in our community to extract even more money from their employers due to the labor shortage.
yeah, we're looking at about 35 more jobs too.
That's
on top of that,
awesome.
Hopefully
Love
you
it.
can find the workers.
Well,
It's a struggle, for sure, yeah.
You can find them. You just have to pay for them.
Is that a motion, Mr. Zuloff?
Training.
Is that a motion, Mr. Zuloff?
Aye.
Chairman, or,
I know I normally don't do this, but I just want to point out how amazing these guys have been to work with. As soon as they saw the pathway coming through there, they got excited about it. They approached us a couple years ago about doing an expansion. They've talked to us, they've worked with us, they've rearranged things, and they've really embraced the pathway. And one of the reasons that we are where we are right now is because I am with the pathway is because we have people like them that love the idea of this coming through the back of their property, and that they really want to make sure that they're encapsulating everything that the city's been trying to do. So I know it's a little out of line for me just to come up and praise them, but I just want to say thank you publicly to them for the work that they've done to help us out to get through here.
Thank you. Good comment.
Mr.
Miller.
Chairman, I couldn't let that one just float out there. I mean, I wanna say that the pathway has been a long-term goal of many people around here. And that was my single question, was related to the pathway parking, like I'm picturing a node to jump on that thing. So, yeah, I heartily endorse you endorsing the pathway.
Thank you.
and the way that the administration, the staff has delicately and skillfully orchestrated this coming together of the community to get this done, and it's no easy thing, is remarkable.
You got one of them battery bikes, yeah.
Sure. Any more comments on this application?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve this application as presented. Quick.
Subject to the staff
Yes.
requirements and conditions.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Castillo. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I guess we will call the question.
Mr. McGorry?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes,
Ms. Castillo?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Pajali?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Mr. Zuloff?
Yes.
Congratulations, gentlemen.
so much.
Good luck. Good luck moving forward.
Can't wait.
All right, we can go home now, can't we?
Okay, next item on the agenda, under old business, Ms. Rhonda Jackson had withdrawn an application. I guess that's all we need to note for the record.
Unless you have questions.
I do believe so, without the law department here to confirm.
That's been withdrawn. And then the next item I see is under other business, updates from the chief planner.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. We talked about that I had been given some comments at other meetings, and it's not on the agenda, and I might just keep that as a standing item on the agenda, so I have a chance to say hi if I have any comments or address questions. Two things I wanted to mention, since I know we have a lot of people from the public that are all eyes on us. We've had a lot of conversations about transient rental lately. There were 2 items that we had tabled they weren't actually items, they were public hearings. We did conduct those public hearings about the potential of transient overlay districts in the city, and it's our understanding that we conducted that public hearing. If any commissioner would like to move to have another public hearing, it's your prerogative to do so. But we did conduct that public hearing, and we wanted to be clear to the public, if we were going to be discussing that again, that they would get a notice again in the mail, and that's why we took those off the agenda. So that's one thing I wanted to address. And I also just wanted to mention, we have been having so many conversations about transient rental because we are a seasonal destination community, and it's something that we're struggling with. We see a lot of demand for that. We see properties that are not in compliance that are operating as transient rentals when they're not permitted. Our code compliance division works with those and follows up with them to make sure that they can get people into compliance and shut them down if they're not in areas where they are allowed. We do take those comments seriously from the public and make sure that we follow up with those properties. I also wanted to point out, the conversations that we have about transient rental really are revolving around neighborhood stability, protecting our neighborhoods, housing availability, making sure we have housing for people that want to live here year-round, housing affordability, helping to the extent that we can from a policy perspective of keeping housing affordable for the income levels that are in our community. And we also want to target investment. We recognize that people that want to operate transient rentals want to put money in properties, and we love it when people put money in properties, right? It helps the overall quality of life of all of our residents, and we take those very seriously. So I just wanted to remind everyone that might be listening to this that there are 6 districts that allow transient rental by right. That's commercial recreation, CR, commercial services, downtown business district, general business, roadside business, and residential business. There's one that allows, transient rental is allowed, and this is just as much for us all in the room as anyone listening to this. Local business allows transient rental with a conditional use permit. One of the things that we talk about targeting investment, people want to do Airbnbs in the city. And we talk about, well, how can we help target places we know need investment? So I want to point out that there's a stretch of local business zoning along the Hancock Street corridor. There's a lot of commercial properties there that could use some love, and maybe there's potential for new mixed use there with transient rental on top and new retail spaces on the bottom, and we could see that become a vibrant retail node like it was historically. There's a lot of local business zoning on Columbus Avenue between Adams Street to the north and where it splits to Campbell at the south, that could I could see a lot of potential for Airbnb being a targeted investment with a new retail node district there, as it historically was, where that one clock tower building is, right? Along the West Washington corridor, there's a lot of general business zoning that allows transient rental. North of that, there's a lot of very small housing between, like near the Shelby Boat Launch area, that's zoned residential business. It's a brown color on our zoning map that allows transient rental. So there's a lot of places for investors to buy property, to fix up, to provide more transient rental in the housing that's already allowed by right in our zoning code. So I just want to point that out for anybody that's listening, because I know that there's a lot of ears and eyes on this process right now.
Could I ask you a question here?
You may, yes, please.
You were saying about the map that already identified areas where if we could make that particular map available to the public.
Yes. So cityofsandusky.com/transient rental. There's the map, there's explanation, there's the permit, there is the zoning map that shows those categories, those areas.
All right.
Thank you.
You had other topics besides transient rental, which I heard 30 times or so?
We get a lot of calls and a lot of interest. And
Okay,
that's what I
how
wanted
is
to
it that
address.
we're not hearing of anything about the results of the RFP for Jackson Street parking lot, for example? Is there nothing to report there? Nothing to report on Battery Park? No developments at all? That these are big deals that people are buzzing about and asking questions about, and I don't want to be in the situation where I learn about what's happening in our planning department in the register.
Thank you for that prompt. I will mention, one that you didn't mention, we got a grant to update our design guidelines for the Landmarks Commission that we just, City Commission accepted, that we can expend that grant. So we got a $18,800 grant from the State of Ohio Historic Preservation Office to update our design guidelines, which were originally written in 2007 and haven't been updated since then. So that's something exciting going on in the Planning Division. We expect to launch that project this fall, and we have to spend it all by December 2023. On the parking lot RFP, so those submissions were due, I believe it was July 8th, and we got 6 proposals. We interviewed 3, and so we should have some public announcements on that soon. And there was a steering committee, a large...
That sounds like success with the RFP if you got 8 proposals.
Yes, we got proposals, and there was a larger steering committee who reviewed all of them, recommended which ones would be interviewed, and then a smaller interview
There was
committee, and then-
what kind of, what committee?
like a steering committee, like a group of people that read all the proposals that Mr. Holliday put together, and Mr. Webster put the group together. So that included a commissioner and several community members and representation from the Chamber of Commerce. I'm sure that there will be like an official recounting of that process when that comes out. Battery Park, I don't know anything, I haven't heard anything, so I'm just as kind of curious to see what they'll propose when they're ready. I will mention the Columbus Avenue design process is seeking public feedback on draft concepts. So what we did was a walk with stakeholders on Columbus Avenue, and then another set of follow-up stakeholder conversations, calls, and a meeting. We did facilitated a workshop with the Public Arts Commission, which that meeting's online if you want to see that. We're going to be at the Jackson Street Pier tomorrow from 6 p.m. until the music starts with draft concepts for Columbus Avenue. And then we're going to be at the Farmers Market on Saturday from 9 a.m. to 10:30. So we'll be outside just with the visuals, asking people what they think. And there's an online survey posted for that too, which you should be able to find on the Facebook page. And then our communications manager was working on a web page link to that as well. I don't have that address.
I have a question, just going back to transient rental. I've just been sitting here thinking, in the Cove District overlay district, if someone had a house that they lived in and a 2 or 3 car garage and made an apartment over the garage, and there were enough off-street parking, is that allowable? That's a single-family area, I think, to begin with.
That's an interesting question. So what you're mentioning would be categorized as an accessory living accommodation if it's not in the primary structure, or an accessory dwelling unit. Currently in our code, accessory living accommodation is defined as something that doesn't have a kitchen. It is allowed in all residential categories. Some residential categories allow like renting rooms, but it's not clear how we would permit that at this time, but it is something we're interested in looking at in the future.
What if that apartment had a kitchen and a bedroom?
Yeah, so currently they can't get an occupancy permit to have a secondary structure with a full kitchen in the city, like a carriage house sort of situation, which was very common historically, but our zoning code defines accessory living accommodation as something that does not have a kitchen.
Okay.
So, but that is something, it's because that white paper that I wrote you all in December, accessory dwelling units are a way that some cities are using as a strategy to keep long-term residents, because in the primary house, you have your long-term rental, and then the secondary structure, an accessory dwelling unit, you could have a transient rental. And that's a way that other cities have addressed to kind of allow both. You keep your local residents, and maybe they're the ones operating it, so the neighbors aren't as concerned, sort of situation.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to mention to Mr. Zuloff that I am on the City Commission, and that's the first briefing I got on any of those projects either. So I guess you got a little preferential treatment tonight on the Jackson Street Pier. I mean, on the hotel, the RFP process. The other thing I wanted to say was I appreciate all the work staff's done through this whole transient housing process, kind of walking us through and giving us all the options. It's been tough, and I also appreciate Ms. Castillo and Mr. Miller, all the work they did on that subcommittee. We had a lot of debate and a lot of differing opinions, and I guess we ended up where we started.
If I could summarize that, it seems to me like what the current thought process is to advertise what's currently available for that and encourage usage there rather than trying to expand that footprint.
Exactly, and I think we want to get it right. And it's easier to move slowly than to approve a lot of stuff, short-term gain, long-term pain, and then try to reel it in if it's not right.
Okay, any further comments, any further discussion? Anybody want to move for adjournment?
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.